All right, so this is what I want to talk to you about. Okay, now if you really think about it, okay, generally with women, like let me ask you a question. Okay, let's say there's two women, two scenarios, right? There's an 80-year-old guy, okay, basically Hugh Hefner, whatever. Okay, this guy obviously has a reputation for being with a lot of young women, young girls, young women, right? Okay, one of those 24, 23, 22-year-old girls goes to Twitter and says, "I don't care what you say, but Hugh Hefner, this guy that I'm with, this 80-year-old, wrinkled up, shriveled up person, okay, is a better lover than you will ever be. He is a world class lover. He is something special, okay?" And she says this on Twitter, okay? Let's say her fan base is half women, half men, okay? There's, unless the majority of the people that follow her are porn stars or something like that, swingers or something of that nature, okay? If they're regular women, right? You know, that you find at your regular high schools and colleges, you know, all around the world, okay? You're gonna find a bunch of people that are gonna look at this woman like she's got egg on her face. Like, how could you possibly say something, you know, about this guy that is positive? Okay, how could you say something of this nature? Okay, about this guy, this is, you know, absurd, right? And so they'll trash her, they'll insult her, they'll berate her, okay? They'll make her feel as if she has no use on the planet, okay? In fact, we'll go so far as to say they are abusive, okay? All right, they are abusive, right? Then let's say you get the same exact girl, you know, same exact situation, 80-year-old guy, Hugh Hefner type, whatever, you know, and she says, "No, I slept with this guy, okay, and you know, I woke up in bed with him, okay, and I asked, do we sleep together?" And he said, yes, okay. Now, keep in mind that nobody said, okay, that he abused her or that, you know, he did anything wrong or anything like that, right? In fact, okay, this happens all the time. People black out who, you know, are completely coherent. It happens all the time, right? But instead of looking at it like, okay, like, you know, um, instead of looking at it from a point of view of, you know, what do you call it? Instead of looking at it from the point of view of, you know, this guy is, you know, oh, it's just a mix-up, or, you know, he's a smooth operator, or something like that. The first thing that they do is they default to him being an abuser. Okay, he tricked her, he abused her, you know, he's a deceptive person, he's devious. Okay, he preys on the weak, he preys on the young. Okay, keep in mind, okay, that it's her. She is the one who is doing the praying. Anybody's praying, it's her. Okay, she went so far to pray, okay, that she would not give any play to any other 80-year-old, okay, except for the one that is, you know, got money coming out of his ears. Okay, she's the one who's praying. Okay, we don't say anything about that. Okay, we don't mention that she's doing the praying. Okay, we don't mention that she is the one who is the, the one who says, okay, I am tricking him to get as much money out of this situation as humanly possible. Okay, and I'm sorry, but if that's not preying on somebody, that what is it, right? So this girl says on her YouTube or whatever, on her Twitter, you know, oh yeah, this guy, I don't really know what happened. I don't know what happened. Okay, we're talking about a big blank, right? We're talking about a clean slate. Nobody knows what happened. Okay, no one said anything about any type of abuse. Nobody said anything about anything, nobody doing anything wrong. Everything's been fine, right? The first thing those people are going to do is say, he must have drugged you. He must have done something ridiculous to you. Okay, in order for you to wind up in bed with him, he must have given you drugs. He must have slipped something in your drink. Okay, he must have done something, right? But we're talking about a situation that is completely ambiguous. Okay, she could have just, how many times have we woken up somewhere and we're like, thought we were in another city and we're really in another city? We thought we were in city A, we're in city B. Okay, how many times have you woken up and you thought you were at your aunt's house, but you're at your cousin's house? Or you think you're at person A's house, you're at person B's house. How many times have you woken up, you thought you were in your own bed, but you were in a friend's bed? Okay, people make mistakes all the time. Okay, especially when alcohol comes involved, right? And then you say, oh well, women, they can't make decisions, when they're impaired on alcohol. Okay, the guy was impaired on alcohol too. Okay, and there's no proof of any type of coercion or anything like that. Okay, for all we know, she could have taken advantage of him. Okay, and this is what I'm saying, is that we have a thirst. I look at it like this, like, I think in the Western world, okay, we have a thirst for the salacious, right? So, for example, okay, I could go to China and somebody says, okay, the mayor or the prime minister or whatever, okay, this politician, okay, slept with someone outside of his marriage, slept with a girl outside of his marriage, or went outside of his marriage for you know saw a prostitute, okay, was sexting somebody, sent a picture of his penis, whatever, okay, you know what they're gonna say? Who cares? Okay, who cares? Okay, there's a guy. His name is Silvio Berlusconi. Okay, he's a prime minister of Italy. Okay, for a lot of years. We're talking about, like, I don't know. I think it must have been like 10, 15, 20 years or something like that. Okay, before that, he was a huge media mogul. Okay, in Italy. And what happened was he got caught um, having sex with a girl who was 17 years old. Okay, he got found innocent. Okay, he lost his job as prime minister. Okay, but do you know how many parties he had before that? Okay, where they were flooded, okay, with models, the most beautiful women you ever saw in your life. Okay, everybody was having sex. Everybody was having a good time. Okay, the sort of we're better than those guys, we're better than them attitudes and behaviors is specifically very colonistic in nature. Okay, so what do I mean by colonistic in nature? Okay, Western countries, like say the United States. So think about it like this, right? You have the United Kingdom and you have most of Europe, right? Most of what's called the Schengen area. The Schengen area. I'm not exactly sure how to say it or whatever. Schengen area. Okay, and people basically from those areas went out, traveled outside of their area, outside of Europe. Okay, to basically use things like guns, gunpowder, weapons, advanced weaponry to um, hold, these smaller tribes and, unorganized quote unquote people, okay, to, you know, give their land and resources to them. So then what would happen is they would extract the resources from these different places on Earth, okay, and give it to the the mothership, okay, which would be like the UK, the United Kingdom, right? So France, colonizes some country in, Africa or something like that. What they do is they steal resources. They take those resources and then they use it for, to put, diamonds and gold, on the king or the queen's crown. Okay, and they just pillage resources. That's the whole point. Okay, and so what happens is, but the attitude of you have to understand that there was a rude awakening and almost sort of a this is what happens when colonism goes too far, right? With the Nazis. Okay, and so then that happened. And so, but Europe was directly affected by that. But the United States was all the way on the other side of the world, okay, free from the Nazis actually bombing them or coming into the country and taking over and doing this crazy whacked out crap, okay. So what happened was the U.S. was basically unaffected, okay. So these other countries were basically, um, there is like battery life. Their battery is at 20%, 10%, 15%. They needed a lifeline. Okay, the United States gave them money. Okay, but in doing so, they said, okay, well now you are a colony of us. You are a colony of the United States. Okay, now in order for people to feel like they're the policemen and women of the world, okay, they have to feel superior to other people. That's part of the the that's part of the the that's part of the I'm trying to think of the right word. That's part of the formula, okay, for colonization to even work, okay, or in order to be the policemen and women of other countries, it's like, okay, we do things wrong, and nobody can call us on it, but they do something wrong, and we're gonna go into their country, and we're gonna take over their land, we're gonna pillage them, and we're gonna take over their resources, we're gonna take over their oil, okay, and we're gonna get somebody in power, okay, who is a puppet, okay, for our country, okay, and the U.S. is kind of like the last Mohican. We sort of like mastered the art, right? So you have to understand that the U.S. has been at war, okay? Has only spent the longest time the United States of America has ever spent not in a war is 7 years, okay? Since its inception, 7 years, okay? Okay, and so what I'm saying is that the attitudes that you're going to get in America are oftentimes going to reflect the colonization the sort of, we're better than you attitudes, right? So when somebody does something that is truly impressive, okay, hey, I made $1 billion in music and sold liquor, okay, and made $1 billion. Everybody wants to find something wrong with that person. That's part of colonization, right? It's just part of the system, right? It's happened to them, but instead of saying it's wrong that this is happening to me, let me put my foot down and stand against it. They say, well, this is just how things are, right? And so that old, ugly, wretched old man, okay, taking advantage of that pure, virginal 20-year-old girl, okay, what a shame, what a terrible person, right? But you, but, but you don't really see this happening in other countries. You're not going to see that in the United Arab Emirates. You're not going to see that in China. You're not going to see that in Japan. Okay, you might see it, but it's not going to be as prominent or as prevalent. Things like, the Me Too movement could never happen in these countries. The Me Too movement could never happen in, you know, um, Slovenia or Slovakia or, one of the Slavic countries or whatever. It couldn't happen. How come? Okay, because the fact is that the desire, okay, to tear down, right, people with great wealth and success is just not as prevalent. Do you understand what I'm saying? It just doesn't. That culture doesn't exist. Those morals have not been propagated into the culture, into the fabric of the culture, right? It all starts at the top, right? With the media, what they show on television, what they show in the newspapers. Okay, if they showed in the newspapers, oh well, you know, um, you know, this prime minister, cheats on his wife, so we fired him, right? The average person in one of these, Eastern European countries would say, for what? So what? Who cares? Okay, what's the use of being a politician if you can't have women on the side? That's what they would say, right? You're not gonna have all this. You see what I'm saying? So it's coming from the top. If you don't see it in the newspapers and the magazines, right? Or if you see, wealthy, powerful, successful old guy, okay, with, that goes through woman after woman after woman, that's 20 years old, okay, and that's okay, okay. Then if somebody else in society does the same thing, no one's gonna bat an eye, right? But we in America have such a crab in a bucket mentality in general. It's like, okay, let me take down my political opponent, okay, and accuse him of, sleeping around with his wife, and we're gonna prove it. We have photographs, and we've chased them around. We got photographs of them. We have proof that you sent these texts to this woman. You know, you called her beautiful. Okay, you deserve to get kicked out of your position, and you owe this woman, millions and millions of dollars. Okay. See, the thing is we are lacking the ability to call out the sort of, you know, we lack the ability to call it abusive, right? If you'll sit there and you'll call this old guy, uh, you know, abusive, he's taking advantage of this young girl, right? But you won't say that this young girl's taking advantage of this old guy. There's a problem, point blank, period. Because we know, and I know that she's not touching that guy unless he has the money, right? Okay. If a woman were to be able to say, you know what, I was with this guy. He's 80 years old. Okay, he's amazing in bed. Okay, I'm sorry. You know, I'd sleep with this 80-year-old guy right now, and she can say that on her social media. Okay, freely. Okay, I would feel more comfortable trusting her when she says, oh my God, I waited 18 years before, I could tell, anybody, publicly before I could go to the cops and tell, about my abuse and da 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 da. Okay, I believe it then because this person has shown that they are not just doing what's easy, right? A lot of people just do what's easy. Okay, they just hop on a bandwagon. Okay, the easy thing to do is to, say he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's stupid. He's this. He's that. Whatever. Whatever. Okay, I'm just gonna hop on that bandwagon. I'm not gonna put any thought into anything that I say. You see what I'm saying? And as long as I have a loud voice, and I hop on the biggest bandwagon, I mean, how can I be wrong, right? So that's what I'm saying.